While on tour, Jack White needs management to make sure there are no bananas in the building. And if you're hosting Mariah Carey, you'd better have 20 white kittens on hand.
Daddy wasn't finding a bow wow. Daddy wasn't finding a bow wow. I love my little cat. I'm very fond of that. I'd rather have a big bow wow 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 wow. Daddy
Hello, and welcome to the Mochiverse. I'm Linette.
And I'm Skip.
Hello. And today we've got a creature double feature. We thought it'd be fun to talk today about unreasonable demands, right? More specifically, we're going to touch on some of the very particular requests of both touring musical acts, and these are otherwise known as hospitality riders or band riders. And just because it's really not that different when you think about it, the last meal requests of condemned prisoners.
Very similar.
Very similar, right? And I have to give you credit for coming up with the pairing, which I still think is a brilliant idea. Like we had our master list of ideas, and I think you were just having a moment of inspiration. You just looking at it and going, that one kind of goes with that one. Let's put a little.
Every once in a while, I wake up and smell the coffee.
Yeah, I just woke up like this, actually, guys.
Yeah.
So is it like, that's what I do? You say like, that's what I do. I drink coffee and I know things.
No, that's right. That's right. I know things. Yeah. One in a row, So
Oh, one in a row. Oh, that's nice. You're on a hot streak.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about what a rider is. A rider, in the larger sense, is actually a really important document. It's a contract between the venue and the entertainment. So it's talking about bands. There's also riders for like comedy acts and politicians and anybody who's going to be up on stage doing a show. And I found a really great site. Let's see. I think I'm going to shout it out, actually. It's called The Smoking Gun. It says Backstage The Smoking Gun. And it has lists of just so many of these. And you can actually see the documents. You can actually see the contracts. And a lot of it is very technical, but over the years, they've evolved to make the hospitality part more complicated. And we'll get to like some of the stories behind that. But basically, it's a list of requirements that the act is asking the venue to provide in lots of different ways. So you're talking about dimensions of the space, lighting, electricity requirements, like any equipment necessary for the show, details about show times and box office specifics, like when to allow ticket sales, things like that. There's a security, the number of runners and necessary staff that they have, because these venues, they have people who work for them all the time. And they're called runners, and they're the ones who go out and get all the things you're supposed to have. And there's a lot of things you might not think of, like making sure the radio frequencies in the area won't interfere with the audio equipment. I saw this in a rider for Def Leppard. And while it's very practical and it makes a lot of sense, it reminded me of that scene in This Is Spinal Tap, where they're at like an Air Force base and they're trying to play their show. And the audio system was picking up like transmissions from planes.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, it was really funny. They're like trying to play their song, and they're in this really shitty, like small stage with like 12 people watching them. And then all of a sudden they're like in the middle of their song and you hear like Alpha, Delta, whatever the letters are. You probably know what those letters are.
Yep.
I don't know any of those letters.
This is the Sandman back at you, So
Yeah. I just think of that SNL sketch where they're in flight emergency, let's just say, and they're on like a tour. So like both the pilots are unconscious. And so like people who are running the tour have to fly the plane and they don't know what they're doing. So they call like ATC or whatever, and it's Scotland. And they can't understand the Scottish accent.
Okay.
So he's trying to tell it, like, it's James McAvoy who's doing the ATC. And he's like saying all this stuff. And the guy's like, I'm really sorry, but like your accent is really thick. Is it possible to not have it? But as it turns out, I saw a lot of riders that had radio sort of requirements. They're like which frequency they're going to be on so that they're, it doesn't interfere with, and they're walkie-talkies and everything too, because all these people, these runners behind the scenes on a show have walkie-talkies all the time. When you're looking at, they're actually pretty fascinating if you like those kinds of things, which I do. But you can tell by reading them that they have become more complicated over time out of necessity. Like the same reason that packages of suppositories say unwrap before inserting. Somebody did something.
That's right.
So something bad happened in the past. And so that's like kind of the origin of where the weirder ones got started. I mean, like there's always been weird requests, right? You always hear about all of these. The most well-known and maybe the catalyst for some of the weird ones was for a very smart, practical reason. And from someone that if you grew up when I grew up, you would think like, okay, you wouldn't expect such a well thought out idea, I guess. I don't want to insult this person, but it begins with David Lee Roth, which if you know who David Lee Roth is, you don't really think of him as a great thinker. You think of him as like a goofy guy, funny guy. He's like jumping around on stage, look at me kind of guy, right?
Yep.
But he was actually very involved in the backstage stuff, apparently. And so the story is that Van Halen in the 80s, they had a lot of really huge, elaborate lighting rigs, staging equipment for their shows. The concerts were known for big light shows with pyrotechnic stuff and all of those things happening, explosions, mega sets. And they like to make a big splash because it was the 80s. So I watched a video with David Lee Roth, and he was talking about like some of these older venues that they'd be going to had like a lot of trouble setting up all this nonsense because a lot of the people were unfamiliar with requirements of the equipment and such. And they also had like, like the electricity in these buildings, maybe it wasn't up to what they needed. He said like the doors weren't big enough to get everything in. And he figured, they were taking like a really long time to set up. He figured that the problem was crew that wasn't familiar with what all the technical and structural stuff was, safety issues. But then he was saying, because it was taking so much longer to set up, it was causing a lot of like expense. It was costing a lot of money for the band, the venue. And then he was talking about union stuff. You start talking about how many hours these people can work and you're going into overtime and things like that. And he was the one who designed a lot of these sets and a lot of the lighting parts for the sets. So what he did was he wrote up a really enormous, big, huge contract. And he put a lot of legalese in it. And he put all the technical requirements for the involved things. Like he would put like the distance between the high voltage sockets and the heights for certain rigs, load bearing requirements and things like that. And then in the middle of all the technical stuff, he wrote, "There will be no brown M&Ms in the backstage area or the promoter will forfeit the show at full price." Right. So he would go in as they're setting up and go backstage and look at the bowl of M&Ms. And if they had any brown ones, he would know that someone hadn't read the contract and they were possibly going to run into safety issues. Someone wasn't doing their job.
Yeah, that's a good way to keep a check on things.
Right.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty clever to put in like, it's sort of like, it reminds me of the paper towns thing. I think it was Rand McNally, the map makers.
Mm-hmm.
They were concerned that other map makers were just sort of copying their maps and selling them. They were just like forging their stuff.
Right.
And so they invented like streets and towns that didn't exist and put them in their maps on purpose so that they could tell if they saw these other companies making maps, if those streets and towns were in there, they knew that they were like forgeries and they could go after them, that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
It's very
Okay.
clever. So there you go. So pretty sound reasoning from David Lee Roth, actually.
Yeah, there was pretty sound reasoning. That's right. That's a nice little, there's always checks and balances. And that's a good way to have to assure. Anything like that is a good way to assure that people are actually looking at what you've written, which is a pretty common thing. It's just like reading emails, or not so much text anymore, but when reading emails, some folks would get by the first couple of sentences and that would be it, especially if it was a long one,
Yeah. And this is why when you read articles, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but if you read an article at the top, it might say TLDR. Have you ever seen that written in like a long article? It'll say like a summary of the article. It'll say TLDR. And then it'll say like just a short little summary of what the article's about. TLDR stands for too long didn't read.
Cool.
So you could just read that part.
Hmm. Well,
But yeah, so it became a whole thing. And I mean, I think that other bands have done this for years. And so of course it became a whole thing. And I think that not necessarily starting in the 70s and 80s, but from the 80s and beyond, you really do see more specific contracts. You see more specific stuff in these riders. And so we're going to give you some examples of those today. For this episode, we're going to be mostly talking about the hospitality part of the rider because, the technical stuff is very interesting, but I don't know if it's interesting enough for everybody to talk about distances of lighting and types of lighting. And it was cool to read, I have to say. And I do feel it's very necessary for so many reasons. It explains the very real needs of the show going the way it's supposed to. It's kind of stunning when you think about how much work goes into any kind of production. We were just talking about this off mic. We were talking about how much work goes into films, and think about the person whose job it is to make sure your haircut looks the same for the next 8 weeks, and make sure, the other thing I think about all the time when you watch action movies and somebody gets a very specific sort of abrasion or cut on them, how the continuity of that throughout the entire movie is pretty impressive.
yeah, you see that actually when you see it in episodic TV,
Yeah.
where somebody gets the crap kicked out of them, and in the next episode their face is all clean.
Yeah.
And then on the other side is you'll see one that stay true to that. In the next episode, their face is all marked up, and people are remarking about it. So
Yeah, I always like it when you're watching a TV series and somebody gets an injury and that injury slowly gets better over time. I think that's clever.
yeah,
And then when they kind of don't do that, it's like, okay, well, how much time has passed? You have no idea now. Could be like 10 months from now that the next episode is on. It's actually a subtle thing that helps you realize how much time has gone by. Like, I never
right.
watched that 24 show, but I imagine there's a lot of stuff in that where it's supposed to take place over a very short period of time. So
24 hours, yeah.
everything has to be consistent. And I can imagine how difficult it is to do an entire series of a show that's supposed to take place in one day.
Yeah, yeah.
That must be kind of crazy. But anyways, the hospitality stuff is just fun. And it does get a little bit tedious after a while. And you do realize, like, I had to keep going back and forth and looking at the years of these tours because I was like, they're specifying name brands of snacks, So I'm like, oh, do they have that back then? And then I look and it's like 97 or like 2006. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, they have these things. They're like specifying name brands of yogurt that they want to have, and
Right.
certain drinks and things like that. But some of it is very cute and very funny. So starting at the beginning, I had to put the Beatles first because the Beatles are the Beatles.
Yep.
And I knew that would interest you. It was kind of cute to look at the Beatles one because it was very non-specific. And I think that, they were quite young at the time then they came out onto the scene. And I imagine they were just sort of ushered around and they didn't know what went into things they had to do. By the time they were done, I'm sure they had a lot more very specific requests and very specific things because a couple of those guys were a little diva-ish.
Yep.
One of them anyway. It was really funny to look at theirs. In the 1965 rider, all they asked for was electricity and water, 4 cots, mirrors, an ice cooler, portable TV, and clean towels. And of note, I was skimming through and I saw it. Earlier in the rider, there's a specific clause that states artists will not be required to perform before a segregated audience. And if you look in the 60s, there were a lot of bands that wrote that. They had to write that in their contracts. I think a lot of bands were showing up to venues and realizing that the venue was segregated and they were like, nope, I'm not going to do this. Or they did it anyway and they felt terrible about it.
Right.
There's clearly a reason for that being in there. So I thought that was interesting. The Rolling Stones was not as melodramatic as I expected. They asked for a snooker table, not a pool table. And it says in big, like all caps, not a pool table.
Right.
And the band will provide their own snooker balls, which is funny. Video game machines, and they were very specific. They said a motor driving game, a pinball machine, a combat game, a virtual reality game, and a game suitable for children and families. And a ping pong table if space allows, which is very generous of the Rolling Stones, I think. And it was interesting to read that. But beyond that, all they cared about, they wrote it so many times in their contract, clean bathrooms. They like said extremely clean bathrooms like 7 times in the contract. I'm like, what happened to you guys over the years?
It could be in the early years that they would, like a lot of bands and artists, they play in dives or places, yeah, nightclubs that are not really known for their cleanliness.
True. That's true. And I did see like a couple of artists, like I think Meatloaf was one and somebody, Elton John was another. They made sure they wrote multiple times that the artist was a superstar. They wrote that in there and treated like a superstar. Like they, in other words, like VIP, like this is
Right.
important, guys, which I thought was interesting. Thinking back on like maybe like Sting when he was playing in little dive bars and nightclubs, like, and later on he's just like, guys, I don't want to see any of this crap on my. I might do a small venue to be all hip, but
Yeah.
I'm not using those urinals if they're disgusting. I understand that. Ted Nugent, who's he's pretty batshit. He had a bunch of very specific food and drink requests, but specifically he required, in all caps, man-size Kleenex. I want to know, Dad, do you buy man-size Kleenex or do you buy like lady Kleenex? What do you buy?
I just use my sleeve. No,
you just use the back of your sleeve.
Yeah. I never really looked at it that way. I don't even know there would be man-sized Kleenex unless you're talking about rather than the little 1x1 or whatever it is, a small square of Kleenex that you see. He might be talking about a bigger box, like a standard
like
box.
a regular size box. Yeah, he's such a dope. Actually, you're getting to be of the age where you don't use Kleenex anymore. You're going to have like an actual handkerchief that you keep up your sleeve, right?
All right.
Just a snot rag that you just pull out.
I've never used one. I think I always had, if I did have one, it was more decoration in my in a coat, jacket pocket. Yeah.
I bet you had a couple of uncles who had those nasty ones though.
Oh, I would say so. Yeah. Actually, your grandfather did.
On my mother's side. Yeah. Oh, I can see that.
Yep.
Yeah, I could totally see that because he was a casual type of guy.
That's right. Exactly.
He had those, and he didn't like to think too much about his wardrobe choices because I remember he either didn't want to buy new clothes every time he lost or gained weight, or he just didn't want to bother getting sized because he wore suspenders and pants that were way too big, like Fatty Arbuck.
Yeah. Actually saw somebody with suspenders the other day. It sort of surprised me. I hadn't seen that in a while.
Oh yeah, suspenders are cool. I mean, it's a look, but
it was an older gentleman.
I guess they still have them,
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, so he also asked for, I like this one too, because this is the kind of example of things I wanted to see a lot of, and I did see a lot of. 1 large bag of Lay's potato chips, and on odd days regular, even days barbecue.
Okay. That's the kind of thing you were talking about. Yeah.
Yes. They specified all of these contracts. They specify like how many cans of soda. There were like 12 cans of Coca-Cola, 12 cans of Diet Coca-Cola, 8 cans of Sprite. It's like, what? Okay. 8 cans of Dr. Pepper, 8 cans of Diet Dr. Pepper. And it's like, wow, I can imagine. I want to be accommodating to the people who are there, want them to have everything they want. And I actually do like it when somebody makes me a list, but what if you put 9 cans of soda in there? Are you in big trouble? Or like they're going to think that, you're not doing your job. It's crazy. It's just crazy to think about. Ozzy Osbourne. I mean, he's cuckoo, but like maybe not super detail oriented, I guess. I mean, his rider was normal. The usual catering menu type of stuff, sandwiches and this and that and the other thing. But he did specify that somebody always be on hand to give him either a B12 shot or a Decadron shot, which is a steroid. Didn't say anything about bats, but
wow. Okay.
And and I can understand. I don't know B12. Okay. I can understand the Decadron. There were a couple of artists who had requests for the Decadron shots, and it's a steroid shot. Being on stage, especially if you're a rock star, must really hurt after a while. You must be, and you have to get up there. So you're probably like really sore. You're tired. You're doing all this stuff, and you have to like get out there and keep going.
Right.
Unfortunately, it also reminded me of this documentary we watched recently about racehorses, where they were shooting these thoroughbred racehorses with like steroids so that they could just keep running through their injuries. But I think that's true in sports too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why steroids are actually banned, but they find ways around it. They would hit it with Novocaine. As a matter of fact, one of the players on the tennis tour, Rafa, he's always had a problem with his foot his whole career.
Yeah.
And what they ended up doing, one of his more recent matches, is that they had loaded him with so much Novocaine he couldn't feel his foot.
Oh my gosh. You're gonna like break something.
Yeah, you wouldn't know if you hurt yourself, so.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Jimmy Buffett, his writer was kind of fun to read because whoever wrote it put in a lot of cute humor in there, which is really cute because some of them are written like legal documents and some of them are written just, you could tell, just by some guy writing stuff, and that whoever wrote it was very interesting. But there's a paragraph in his asking that special attention be paid to dinner time because it gives the opportunity for them to relax and enjoy each other and want to stay on the road forever. There's also a pretty reasonable food list with various normal food items. And one of them it kind of stuck out in my mind. It said various desserts, including chocolate something. There's a chocolate something. And so like, was that Jimmy Buffett himself like dictating to somebody, or did Jimmy Buffett actually write the rider?
What was the other thing there? It was like,
Yeah, at the end, it literally says, and I'm quoting here, it says, and last but not least, a case of frozen Snicker bars.
right.
So, I mean, and then understandably, they had specific distribution instructions for the Corona beer because they were sponsored on that tour, but they were like this many cases during this time, this many cases during sound check, etc. And it had to be like Corona. I don't know if I put it on my list, but I saw that somebody, it was probably Mariah Carey or somebody like that, or Beyonce, was sponsored by Pepsi for her tour. And so it said like, this is very important in all caps. Like there is to be only Pepsi products. Like you can't have any Coca-Cola, anything by Coca-Cola anywhere around, especially in areas where somebody might be seen and a photograph might be taken of them. So like, it would be really bad if like she's sponsored by Pepsi and she's like, somebody on her tour is drinking a Coke and somebody takes a picture and puts it on a tabloid, type of thing. So that's important, I guess.
Yeah, it is. It'd be important to sponsor too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's your money. So you don't want to mess with that. The Beach Boys. I thought this was very Beach Boys. It was very cute. The Beach Boys were very clear about their rule that no promotional materials, including posters, keychains, beer koozies, flyers, t-shirts, anything, is to include the word oldies in association with the band's name.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, I know you have John Stamos like working for you, but like you're an oldies band. Sorry.
Right.
You trying to ignore the fact that you've been around since like the 60s? What are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is not oldies music. We are up to the minute. We are hip.
Yeah. Even though the music's 50 years old. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna play like I Get Around.
Yeah.
They're like, no. We came out with Kokomo in the 80s or 90s or whenever that came out. We're hip. We're with it. It's very funny. Cheap Trick. They will not accept any substitutes for a 12-cup coffee maker with filters, supposedly for warm-up purposes. I don't know. When I think about singers, I don't usually think about like they want warm water. Like they see a lot of specificity with the temperature of bottled water because like your voice can be affected by cold water if you're a singer. So most singers want warm water while they're doing warm-ups and stuff. But coffee isn't something that I've heard of, but I'm not a professional singer. But yeah, so they specified it had to be a 12-cup coffee maker with filters, like no Keurigs, for warm-up purposes. And they also requested pizza from a quality ma and pa or gourmet pizza place. No Domino's, in all caps.
Wow.
Pizza is to be thin crust, well done, cheese and pineapple for one pizza, and 3 cheese pizzas. So you're real specific about like the kind of pizza place you're going to, but your only topping is pineapple. Like all the other ones are plain, like it's like elementary school. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
just cheese pizza for you guys because it's cheaper. That's so funny. Crosby, Stills, and Nash required all meals to be served with Paul Newman's oil and vinegar dressing, which I thought was cute. I don't know what the reason for that is. Maybe they just liked his sort of business practices because he did a lot of charity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. you
Yeah.
did, yeah.
Bunch of dirty hippies. They
Yeah. Yeah.
they wanted to make sure. Oh, they didn't ask about Ben and Jerry's though. I mean, those
No.
are hippies too,
Yeah.
and half of them look like Crosby, Stills, and Nash. So, they also wrote, "Coffee is more important than ever." Yeah, it is. I agree.
I couldn't disagree with that one.
Um, David Bowie, he was refreshingly boring, very normal for his lists. He was just asking for, everybody's asking for fresh fruit and he was asking for normal drinks. But the only funny thing about his was like, this is David Bowie,
Mm.
and his rider was written in Comic Sans font in like paragraph form. Like it was like I wrote it when I was 16. It wasn't that great. I was like, you're David Bowie, like hire somebody. I don't know. I kind of like that though, because it means, he's just like, hey man, let's just all have fun and have a great show. Or like maybe he trusts them. He's like, you know what to do. Just somebody write up a document. ZZ Top, they had pretty simple tastes. An oxygen mask available 30 minutes before performance and immediately backstage, and a doctor on call at all times. A lot of the older rock stars are asking for that too, oxygen masks. And they specifically wanted cocktail franks in a special sauce, and in parentheses, consult with production assistant for the recipe and preparation instructions.
Okay. I
Yeah.
wonder what kind of sauce they're talking about.
Right? ZZ Top.
Yeah.
They're from Texas, right?
Yeah.
So maybe
They like it a little hot.
yeah, maybe some sort of special like Frank's barbecue Frank's hot sauce type of deal. I don't know. Barry Manilow, my boy.
Oh boy.
Yep, he was pretty chill, literally chill. All of the areas are to be 65 degrees at all times and must be adhered to with a bunch of exclamation points. Also, don't worry about decorating Barry's dressing room because his fan club will come in and do that at 11 a.m. Like, I want my fans to come and decorate, whatever that means, his dressing room. Like, with what?
Yeah, with what is right.
Like, I love Barry Manilow. I really do. But I'm sure he's a little bit weird, right?
Yep.
Pharrell Williams, kind of weird. And this was the first one I actually looked at. So the rider was pretty long. It was a long list of like basic snacks, basic drinks, like rolled gold pretzels and X amounts of cans of Coke, X amount of cans of Sprite. But then just like in there, it says 1 box of matches, very important. Also, twice on the list, he has 1 framed picture of Carl Sagan.
Well,
So like,
okay.
I also like Carl Sagan, but I wonder, I'm really curious, like, why does he want a framed picture of Carl Sagan twice on the list? Just in the food area. It's with the food stuff. Like, what does he want? What is he trying to say?
Weird.
Is he trying to remind like any of the crew that some sort of alien thing? Like, what is he doing? It's like, hey, listen, I really just like Carl Sagan.
Yeah, sometimes it's amazing that some folks would have interests that you wouldn't expect. I can recall when we were building a house, and the building inspector was by the numbers kind of guy, and never seemed very friendly.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came in for the final inspection, we were chatting it up a little bit, and he found out I worked for a company that astronomers were one of our main customers.
Right.
All of a sudden, he was like the best friend in the world. He was really excited about it.
That's pretty cool. That actually happened with my eye doctor too,
Mhm.
because not surprisingly, my eye doctor in Massachusetts was also an amateur astronomer
Mm.
because, lenses and things. He was
Yeah.
into telescopes. But he found out that my father-in-law at the time was who he was, who was
Mhm.
also an amateur astronomer. And
Oh, yeah.
so he always wanted to talk to me about amateur astronomy because he thought that because of who my father-in-law was, I was super interested in it. And I'm not disinterested.
Yeah.
But I wasn't like he was talking to me like I was just as much of a fan as he was. It was kind of cute
Yeah.
because he was like a little Italian guy, I liked him a lot. He was very cool. I really like nerdy medical professionals. One of my dentists was super nerdy, and yeah, my eye doctor was really nerdy. I've had a couple of regular doctors who were kind of like nerdy, and then they talk about their geeky stuff, which is very cool.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. My dentist used to go duck hunting in Canada, and he used to talk about that all the time, and I was like really super into it. But anyway, those are the band riders, and of course there are tons and tons of them online. I didn't get too much into the divas. I saw on your list that you had Lady Gaga in your
Mhm.
original notes. Hers was very normal, except for the request for non-smelly, non-sweaty cheese. But I mean, like, I can identify with that. Like, I don't want sweaty, smelly cheese either.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. That's
Right?
yep.
I mean, she was pretty cool because she was talking about the water bottles during like sound check. And she said
Mhm.
how many water bottles she wanted on stage during sound check. But she said they don't have to be flip top. Anything goes. Like, go crazy.
Yeah,
Have
yeah.
screw on tops, have flip tops, like whatever you want, man. Just let your imagination fly with those, the water bottles, with disposable water bottles, I guess. So, yeah, so it's fun. I recommend anybody check out that site. I can send you the link to that if you want. I could put the link in our show notes. It's pretty cool to click through. There were some comedians there also. I didn't look at, Bill Cosby's still on there. Can I just
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to know.
Well, yeah, I don't want to know. That's
I
right.
don't want to
Yeah.
know what's on his list.
Yep.
That's so terrible. Oh, it's probably something innocuous, like before we knew what he was, like Jello pudding pops or something. But no, I don't want to find like, specific drug names listed on his rider or
No,
something.
absolutely not.
For the second of our creature double feature, we have last meal requests. So did you find this one interesting, Dad?
Yeah, I found it pretty interesting. These things sort of evolved as we get into it. You'll appreciate how they've evolved.
Mm-hmm.
This probably started back, in ancient Rome. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
like we were talking about. Imagine this as if you think about the gladiators were treated kind of differently than we expected.
They were very well fed, actually. They were given like medical exams and vitamins and all kinds of other stuff. Yeah.
And if they made it through till I don't know, let's say in their 20s somewhere, they get to retire and they would be given a pension and a place to live. So
Right. Yeah. That is pretty interesting.
yeah.
And then similarly I liked Greece's idea about it though, ancient Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Their idea about feeding someone right before they were executed was if you didn't feed the condemned, they would come back as a hungry ghost. I like that. And of course, they talked about the Last Supper as being an origin of that. But, I think it's just been something that people do for a long time. Of course, we've had on a previous episode, we had a debate about this, about the intention, the real intention behind last meals, like whether it's a gesture of humanity in an otherwise inhumane practice, or maybe it's just a front to show humanity when there really isn't any, or just good PR, or whether it's just something they do. I'm sure as long as there have been the death penalty, there have been people who are against it. And so maybe you want to make some protesters feel a little bit happier about what's happening. Like, see, we're treating them like a human. Because, over time, in the sands of time, prisoners have never been treated well. A lot of people died in prison because of conditions and disease and just horrible things. And I guess it's like you can have one last thing. I imagine that there is some I didn't put this in the notes, but I'm just thinking now. I imagine some of the reasoning for it going back in time could have been religious. There was a reason that executioners hid their identity. That was for religious reasons. These people were worried about their own fate in the
Right.
afterlife.
Mhm.
So it's possible that, giving the last meal to a condemned person kind of gave you extra points in the afterlife, or at least took away some of whatever blame there might be in the afterlife if your afterlife deity decided that it wasn't right to do what you were doing. It's just a little insurance policy, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you can also argue that the last meal thing was to placate those folks that were against the death penalty as
Right.
it was, and just say, we're giving them the last meal. Our position is, we're taking the high road on this.
Right.
In terms of giving them the last meal, we're not going to spare their life, but we are going to give them some measure of humanity, just like what you were just talking about.
Right. At the very least, give him this. Like we talked about in our previous episode, we talked about the last cigarette and the last drink and things like that. It's like, you at least deserve that.
Yeah, except that, they had alcohol and tobacco, usually not something that they give.
Yes, that is true. Usually there are some exceptions, but usually when it's requested, especially nowadays, it's usually just ignored. I would guess that even though they don't talk about it, I would guess that the tobacco part is probably allowed.
Yeah, what's he gonna do?
They just don't talk about it. I think
Yeah.
I don't think there are too many prison guards who would be like, no, you can't have a cigarette. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I bet they'd just be like, yeah, you guys are smoking in here constantly. You guys pay each other with cigarettes. Like, I know you smoke. Like,
Right.
I have a feeling that even though it says like it's officially not allowed, I bet they give him something. So the debate, while it's still unsettled, we do have some weird and interesting examples. Like you said, alcohol and tobacco are usually denied. And interestingly, Texas discontinued the last meal program, or whatever you want to call it, in 2011 after our first case. So Lawrence Russell Brewer, he was a murderer and a white supremacist. So, great guy. He had requested the following for his last meal. And he requested all of this, by the way, for one person: 2 chicken fried steaks with gravy and fried onions, a triple patty bacon cheeseburger, a cheese omelet with ground beef, tomatoes, onions, bell peppers, and jalapenos. Jesus. A bowl of fried okra with ketchup, 1 pound of barbecued meat with half a loaf of white bread, 3 fully loaded fajitas, a meat lover's pizza. Doesn't say what size.
Yep.
A pint of Bluebell vanilla ice cream, a slab of peanut butter fudge with crushed peanuts on top, and 3 root beers. Only 3 root beers.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a lot of food. His meal was approved, and when it was brought to him, he refused to eat it, saying he wasn't hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the food was discarded. And after this, State Senator John Whitmore ended the tradition of last meals for Texas death row inmates. They just get whatever's served that day.
Right.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. And I know there were probably some people who request a final meal and then, can't eat
Yeah.
because they're about to die and they're nervous and they're, having anxiety and they're like, I can't think, I can't do anything. But I think this guy did it to be a dick.
Oh, I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that long list of stuff, he knew he wasn't going to eat any of it. He's like, I want to make all this, come up with the craziest stuff he could think of and then go, nah, no thanks, I'm not hungry.
Yep.
Yeah. What a prick.
Going back in time to Louis the 16th, he
But
requested and was given a pan-fried chicken, some pastries, boiled beef, and pureed turnips. Why would you have pureed? He
I like
additionally
turnips.
additionally received the dessert consisting of 2 chicken wings, vegetables, 2 glasses of wine, cup of water, a piece of sponge cake, and a glass of wine. And
Then they cut off his head.
they
Probably.
cut off his head.
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully he digested before they did that. Then Velma Barfield, a serial killer from the 60s and 70s, had requested a bag of cheese doodles and Coca-Cola. Pretty simple. Yeah.
Yeah, that's me. I would eat a bag of cheese doodles and a diet Dr. Pepper. That's a pretty, or you know what? Actually, yeah, we'll talk about this later. I have some ideas for my last meal.
Okay, John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer, had 12 deep fried shrimp, a bucket of original recipe KFC chicken, French fries, and a pound of strawberries. This, according to one list I read, is the number one requested last meal because he had it. People
Yeah.
trying to copy him.
Yeah, they do. Like in any of the states that still do the death penalty, this is the number one requested meal, that exact meal, because of him. It's like they like idolize a serial killer.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And he was the one, John Wayne Gacy, he was the clown one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should do some true crime stuff. I bet we could get some listeners with that.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. Yeah. True crime. Yeah. Timothy McVeigh.
Mm-hmm.
2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream as his last meal.
Yeah.
Okay.
I read different accounts of the mint chocolate. They all said the same thing, the 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream. But some of them, I don't know if they were just trying to be more journalistic or whatever. Some of them wrote that he ate it alone in his cell. They like specifically wrote that, which is like,
Okay.
yeah, I think most of them do that, but
Hmm.
I don't know if they wanted to say that on purpose because of who he was. But I thought that was an interesting detail that you see in about half of the sites that mention Timothy McVeigh's last meal. It's interesting.
Aileen Wuornos,
Yes.
serial killer from the movie Monster with Charlize Theron, only asked for a cup of coffee.
Yeah. She was the one in Florida. She was around my area. She was around your area. I think she was arrested
Mhm.
in like Flagler Beach. She spent a lot of time in your neck of the woods,
Okay.
right around 75.
Mhm.
And that was where she was doing some of her crimes. She was a sex worker, but then she started killing some of her people. But then she was in Daytona, and she was in like this area as well, which is like kind of creepy because I was living up north when I first learned about her. I came down here, like, oh, her? Oh, she was here? Ah.
Yeah, good. This next one was kind of cool, though, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Victor Figure, I guess.
Yeah, I have no idea how to say his name.
Yeah, he was on death row for murder, requested a single olive with a pit. He said that he hoped an olive tree would grow from his grave and inspire peace.
It is interesting.
Yep.
And I wonder how it was received by the staff of like the prison.
Hmm.
And I don't know what kind of person he was. Like, was he a bullshitter? And was
Yeah.
he just saying that and everybody was like, yeah, whatever, dude? Or was he like, I don't know, was he like sorry for what he
Yeah.
had done and he really wanted to be peaceful? But I guess what happened also after he was executed, they did find an olive pit in the pocket of his suit.
Oh, okay.
And he was actually buried in a different suit. So I think they just threw it away.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah, which is like, okay, if that was a real thing that you requested, you know how people are about requests for dead
Mhm.
people. If that was a real thing that he really wanted to happen, I know he was murder, I know he was this and that and the other thing, and he was sentenced to death, but like, would it kill you to bury him with the olive pit?
What does it hurt? Yeah.
Right. Gerald Lee Mitchell requested a bag of assorted Jolly Ranchers, that's kind of fun. I need to research this guy because he's got a name and a half. Ricky Ray Rector requested steak, fried chicken, cherry Kool-Aid, and pecan pie. When the pie was served, he refused it, saying he was saving it for later. And actually, I do now remember this guy. I think he had a head injury either before he did what he did or after he was imprisoned. I think it was after he was imprisoned, he received a head injury and he had some cognitive issues after that. So depending on what kind of personality he had, that can either be like a really sweet thing.
Okay.
Like a simple, like a, so, oh, I'm saving it for later. Or it can be like, he's being like he's trying to be funny,
Yeah, could be.
But I've watched The Green Mile. I'm kind of picturing it as like, I'm saving it for later, boss, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have no idea about that guy. I haven't researched him, but that was like just popped into my head. Alan Lee Davis requested lobster tail, fried potatoes, fried shrimp and clams, a half a loaf of garlic bread, and 32 ounces of A&W root beer.
Okay.
So I don't know, maybe from New England.
Yeah,
I
would
think.
be. Yeah.
Yeah. And Thomas J. Grasso. We talked about him in our Last Words episode, if you remember. And here's why. He requested the following: steamed clams and mussels, a Burger King cheeseburger, barbecue spare ribs, 2 strawberry milkshakes, half a pumpkin pie, and a can of SpaghettiOs. Okay. And when he was executed, his last words were, "I did not get SpaghettiOs. I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this." He's like a Karen.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty awful. I don't want to. I mean, these are serial killers, so I hope people will forgive me for laughing.
Yeah.
But it just strikes me as kind of funny. I do have a dark sense of humor also. And if you don't know that about me, I don't know how you found this podcast. James Edward Smith requested a lump of dirt as his last meal. Since dirt wasn't on the approved food list, thankfully. I mean, I'm surprised because like prison food, they're not really
Yeah.
they're not really nice to you. But it was substituted for a cup of yogurt, which he ate. So he just, okay, I guess I'll eat this instead of a lump of dirt. Charles Rumbaugh asked for a single flour tortilla. Which I'm not gonna lie, I almost ate that today before we recorded because I was starting to get a little bit hungry, but I wasn't. We had already wasted enough time,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
because I was like doing food and doing dishes and all this kind of stuff. So I opened the fridge and I was like, oh, I got those tortillas. Maybe we'll just eat a tortilla really quick because I'm kind of hungry. But I ate little miniature soft pretzel instead. That's just a very interesting story. Stacy Lamont Lawton, his request was for a jar of pickles. And some sources say it was in addition to like a burger and fries, but I actually can't find too much on it because there's a lot of art pieces dedicated to the story, like all of them sort of depicting jars of pickles. And I think a lot of these art pieces are like an anti-death penalty statement.
Yeah.
I think this particular guy he maintained his innocence up until his execution. So, I don't want to comment on how odd it is to just ask for a jar of pickles. It is kind of odd, but if he was an innocent man, it's also kind of sad, you know. But I think that was a big story. I think he may possibly have been innocent. So I will possibly research that at a later time if we ever do some true crime stories. Philip Ray Workman, he was on death row for the murder of a police officer, requested a vegetarian pizza to be donated to a homeless shelter, and the request was refused because the prison does not donate to charity. So they can't, they're not a charitable institution. But in response, members of the community, like around the time of his execution, like people protesting, donated pizzas to shelters in the town after his execution, which is like, there's never a bad reason to donate food to shelters, but I thought it was an interesting gesture. Again, I don't know anything about what this person did. I don't know if he actually killed a police officer or if he was just on death row for it, but I also can understand how they're like, oh no, we can't donate this pizza because we don't donate to charity. We can't be seen as a charitable institution because we're a prison, we're for profit or whatever. But like, can you just tell them you did it?
Yeah. Exactly. You wouldn't know any better,
Right? Just say, yeah, we'll do that.
Got you covered, pal.
It's all set. And,
Yeah.
maybe a picture of some people smiling in raggedy clothes going, oh, pizza, or something. So just like, he's not going to know the difference. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just think it's pretty silly. Or just do it, just like absolutely do it. Why not? But anyway.
Yeah.
So that's it, folks. I hope you're hungry. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but do you have any ideas about what your last meal would be? I know you like pizza and beer.
Yeah, I would think pizza and beer. Yeah,
Yeah.
pepperoni pizza and beer.
Pepperoni pizza, you usually like garbage pizza.
Well, I'd like a garbage pizza. It would have to be very specific what was on it.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you see sometimes when you order a garbage pizza, or they don't necessarily have a garbage pizza, or at least not down here.
No, remember the first time we ordered pizza when you moved down here and we were like, yeah, everything. And they literally put all of their toppings,
Everything.
all,
Yeah.
every topping. And this was like 5-star and they have a lot of options. They
Yeah.
put literally every kind of topping you can think of except for anchovies, which I guess they don't carry. But there's jalapenos on there, pineapple on it. There's
Oh yeah.
everything on that
Everything.
freaking
Yeah.
thing.
It's just like, so yeah, it's just, when you did a pizza up north, I can't remember what we called it, but we always joked that we call it garbage pizza, which
Yeah.
is basically, would be pepperoni sausage, onions, peppers,
Mushrooms,
mushrooms,
meatball
that
sometimes.
sometimes meatballs. I'm not sure about the meatballs so much, but
Just like little pieces of meat, like
yeah, little pieces of meats, whatever they are, instead
Hamburg.
of a hamburger, yeah, something like that.
Well, some places we would say everything pizza, and that's what they would give you.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, precisely. So yes, that would be the garbage bin. I think the first time, well, I had it a lot, but first time we went up to dinner in the North End, went to this restaurant they call the European. They did one there, and that was probably one of the classic everything pizza. And it didn't have anchovies or anything like that. It just had the kind of things that I'm talking about,
Oh
which is
yeah, I don't
basically
think
sausage.
anybody does
No,
anchovies
but
anymore, right?
I had an uncle that liked anchovies, and he would say, "Oh, I'll buy, but I got to have anchovies." I said, "Well, you're going to have half of the pizza will have anchovies on it."
I mean, people eat anchovy, but I don't. I eat anchovy, but I eat it. It's already ground up. Like I'll eat a
Yeah,
Caesar salad that has anchovies in it.
yeah, it has it in it. Yeah, right.
Worcestershire sauce is made from like fermented anchovies.
Yeah.
Um, but and I eat anchovy paste when I cook it in a specific recipe because it adds a lot of depth to the food. But
Mhm.
like actual little fishies like sitting on the thing, they're weird looking. They look like little
And
shoelaces. I don't know. It's
and
weird.
that's what they would do up north. That's what you would see.
Yeah. Because they were like kind of long, right? Long
Yeah,
and thin.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of gross. But and then would you have tiramisu with it?
As dessert, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and a good cup of coffee,
Good cup of coffee. Espresso or just regular coffee?
regular coffee.
Oh, okay.
It's got to be a good cup of coffee.
Yeah, somebody asked me kind of recently what my last meal would be, and I actually can't. I'm not very good at determining, like, I can never tell somebody what my favorite something is. I can never say any of that stuff because I can't pick favorites, but like, yeah, those cheesy poofs and Diet Dr. Pepper is gonna have to be in there
Mm.
somewhere in my last meal. A lot of Diet Dr. Pepper. I really like pot stickers. I
Oh, okay.
probably I probably would request like a dozen pot stickers, a Diet Dr. Pepper, probably scallion pancakes because I friggin' love those. Maybe crab rangoons. Yeah, I think I want Asian food for my last meal.
Yeah, it's funny, there's a difference between having a food that you'd like to have just once,
Yeah,
or a food that's just absolutely your favorite, that you would be the last meal you would want. It's just like, we went back up north, and we had a specific list of what we wanted to have, like fried clams,
yeah, steak
um,
tips, good steak tips.
good steak tips, a roast beef sandwich, um, and you know those kind of things, and not
That's true.
necessarily saying pizza to that list because we can get pizza down. So there's an argument that you can't get good pizza except in certain areas of the country, and I don't particularly buy that because
Not with
uh,
pizza.
not
Yeah,
with pizza. Pizza is the key to a pizza is, and it's really a personal taste, is the sauce.
yeah.
And
The crust is important too, but like I like all the different kinds of crust, so I'm
yeah,
not super particular. But yeah, the sauce, like I don't like Domino's sauce.
right,
So I would have all caps, no Domino's in
right.
my band rider also. But I do like Domino's their Philly cheesesteak pizza because it has no sauce. So
Yeah, they had we were up north actually. It's very popular up north. I don't think you see it down here. It's the Pizzeria Regina,
yes.
and the original Pizzeria Regina was this little hole in the wall in the north end, and they had a wood-fired oven, that was the Pizzeria Regina, and they've since added some other locations, but
Yeah, when that crust gets burned just the right way.
yeah, just burn the right way, and
Yeah.
then it fluffs up around the edges, and
You get the big bubbles.
that's the big bubbles, and that's kind of the when you only think of that pizza because that's the pizza that at least I grew up with. Where we were in Italy, a lot of the pizza was thin crust.
Yes.
You didn't find a lot of the
Thin crust, but not California crust, right? It wasn't like
yeah,
crispy. It was like
no,
thin, but not, yeah.
yeah, it was thin, but not crunchy.
Yeah. That sounds delicious. I am so hungry right now.
Yeah, I say no pizza. I've got beer in the refrigerator too. So, but I probably couldn't talk it into having pizza tonight. So
Maybe. You
Yeah.
know what, her last meal, what do you think? Do you think she would have something really good for her last meal, or do you think she'd be like, well, I don't know, maybe just some plain chicken and I want to make sure, because I want to be healthy.
yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting point. I mean,
She'll be like, I want all the rum balls. I want all.
could be. I would think that she likes a cheesesteak sandwich, a good
Does she?
cheesesteak sandwich. Yeah. So, and she likes tiramisu also. So
That's true. Yeah, that's true. She likes that zabaglione. Maybe she wants zabaglione.
Zabaglione, yeah. So,
Oh my goodness. Well, we'll have to have her as a guest and ask her what her last meal is going to be.
yeah, that's true.
So, folks, after that tangent that I'll probably cut half of, what are your last meal going to be? Why don't you send us an email and tell us what your last meal would be? Or you can send us a message right here on Buzzsprout or YouTube. You can leave a comment also. Our email is mochiverse@gmail.com. That's MOCCIAVERSE@gmail.com. And please tell your friends that there's this amazing podcast that is so unlike any other podcast that they just need to listen to. We're narcissistic and we need admirers.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, because I'm narcissistic, I need somebody besides myself to admire myself. Anyway, so here's my rider. Every tour, there has to be really bad and really good dad jokes. So have you prepared yourself? Have you done your job?
I have prepared some dad jokes. It's really painful to say this, but I have a bad sore throat. It's the least spoken language? Sign language.
That's true.
Yeah. A cheese factory.
A cheesecake factory.
Downtown. Yeah, it's a cheesesteak factory. Yeah, cheese factory exploded downtown. Debris was all over the streets.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm so good at napping, I can do it in my sleep.
Okay.
What did one DNA molecule say to the other DNA molecule? How do these genes look on me?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, don't go to grass without armor. It's full of blades. Yeah, why? This is probably an old one. Why did the Invisible Man decline the job offer? He couldn't see himself doing it.
Oh.
I'm so bored at work that all I do is crush cans all day. It's so depressing.
I love it. I like that one.
What animal is the worst at hide and seek?
Which
one? A leopard, because he's always spotted.
Okay. Do the one right before it. I like that one.
Okay, 3.14% of sailors are considered pirates.
That's perfect. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. What do you call someone who doesn't have a nose or a body? Nobody knows.
That's so dumb.
Yeah.
That is the dumbest. That's it.
Of course it is. That's the beauty of it, right?
It is. Yeah. Oh God. All right, folks. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye.
Daddy wasn't finding a powwow. Daddy wasn't finding a powwow. I've got a little cat. I'm very fond of that. I'd rather have a big powwow.
This 92-year-old Morris isn't feeling well. He goes to his doctor for a checkup. And a few days later, the doctor sees him walking down the street, smiling, holding hands with a beautiful younger woman. Surprised, the doctor says to Morris, "You seem to be doing well." Morris replies, "I did what you said, Doc. I got a hot mama and be cheerful." Shaking his head, the doctor says, "That's not what I told you. You have a heart murmur and to be careful." Meanwhile, back at the ranch,
What do you call a Frenchman in sandals?
I don't know.
Philippe Flop.
Okay. What the hell?
Philippe Flop.